Susannah Butter, an Evening Standard feature writer. Welcome to Lockdown Sessions. I'm here with Johan Lundgren, the CEO of easyJet, to talk about travel. After the year we've all had, we all need a holiday. How are you feeling today about the state of travel?
Well, listen, I think that if you take a step back, we completely understand and recognize why these measures that has been introduced needs to be there. This is first and foremost a health issue. That's very clear. But what we've been calling out for, and what I think is important for myself and the company and the whole of the industry, and also very much on top of people's mind, is that how are these measures going to be unwinded? How are we going to get back to some type of new normality where we are allowed to fly and to travel again? And we know from surveys and studies, and you're right. I mean, just anecdotally from, I'm sure people and now also Matt Hancock said that, look, I'm going to go on holiday here in the summer. We know that this is one of the things that is on most people's mind of that, and of course it's slightly confusing when you're getting different and mixed messages around that, but I don't put too much into that. The key point here, the most important thing in here, is that we do get a roadmap from the government, hopefully here on the 22nd of February, on how they're going to unwind these measures that's put in place, and if there's a credible plan to do so, when you can do that safely, I'm still very optimistic that people can go on holiday for this summer.
And have you seen an effect on bookings since the latest announcements about the 3 tests that you need and the quarantine if you're coming from high-risk countries?
Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, we do see very much that the travel sentiment and the bookings are reacting on daily, news flow. So, even things like when there is a statement that is prohibiting people from travel, or there are introductions of new measures, bookings come down, and in the cases where there is a signal that actually there might be a summer holiday here coming up in a few months, then we see bookings come up again. And we had a situation here in the fall when the restrictions to the Canary Islands was lifted, bookings went up 900%. So, and I think that also that for every day that goes, that increased pent-up demand is just continuing. Yes, we do see that the statements that comes out from the government and introduction or other questions that has to do with how these measures can be unwinded definitely have an impact on the daily booking flow.
And I mean, the appetite's there. Like we all want to go on holiday, I'm sure. Do you think it's important that the government make it clear and make it accessible? Because airlines like yours have revolutionized travel, they've democratized travel, they've made it kind of possible for people who might not have been able to afford to go abroad previously to do that. Is there a concern that if you have to pay for quarantine, you have to pay for tests, it's just going to be out of reach for many?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. One of the issues that I don't think is being paid enough attention to is that the testings are still very expensive. We have done some arrangement with companies, so we're offering that for the discounted price, but it's still £75, and if you add that up for a family, in some cases you can see that this will actually be a significant part of the investment of going on a holiday, and this is once again which I've been it's so important for us at easyJet to build really our model about the ability for the many to be able to travel. Remember before the deregulation here in 95, this was a product and a service that was really available for people who were pretty well off and pretty wealthy. So it's not so easy just to say, well, okay, let's just now introduce testing and then everything will be fine. Well, that will have a significant impact on the ability on hardworking families and their chances to go on a holiday.
What do you make of vaccine passports?
Well, I don't think it should be mandated. I don't see really that this is an efficient way of introducing this. But I can see if there are cases where, for instance, you wouldn't need to test yourself, that perhaps a document to show that you've been vaccinated could play a part, but I don't think it should be mandated that only people who had taken the vaccine and can show a proof of that can travel. It really comes back, doesn't it, to the person, if they have the virus or not. And I think that's really the key thing. So I think it's important to use the data that is available, that in different jurisdictions, in different places, what are the rate of the infections, what different variants and mutations exist there. And of course, that if that is the same as where you're traveling, from, then really in that case, at least theoretical, there shouldn't need to be any restrictions at all. But of course, we understand completely that now with the different scenarios that exist around the spreads that may be going, that we might see here in the future, what the situation is today, that restrictions need to be in place. But I think that, the testing is really the key component to work out whether you actually have the virus or not. So I don't think that, a mandated vaccines passport is the solution at all.
So when do you think we'll be back to normal, if ever?
Well, normal, if you say if ever, we will get back to a new normality, if not for anything else. Look, we've been saying that we believe it's going to take until 2023 before we are back to the levels of 2019 in terms of demand and capacity. But it's very clear, the success of the rollout of the vaccination is absolutely key here. And if we can see that this continues on the good track and good journey that it's been on, and we can see that also replicated then across Europe, I think we might get a positive surprise in here. Because once again, it is so much on people's mind now that they want to go away on a holiday. And also, mind you, there's a lot of pent-up demand from businesses. Yes, business travel will lag usually 1 or 2 years behind, the recovery of holidays and leisure travel. But still, there are plenty of companies that I know of that we are speaking to as well that is just looking and waiting for restrictions to be removed, so they can also reestablish the connections that they have with other partners and companies and customers.
Have you booked a holiday yet?
I have booked a holiday. Yes, I have booked a holiday. So I have booked a holiday. Now I have booked a holiday previously as well, and then I had to move it, because of the restrictions. But the plan is to go to Mallorca in July.
What do you miss the most about flying?
First of all, flying is primarily, my job. I do it for business reasons, and I miss the people. easyJet is very much, have a feeling of it's a family atmosphere in there, and to go on board a plane and have the opportunity to chat and speak to our crew, and you sit there, and I love to watch, our customers, and I, love to watch, how they behave on board in terms of what are they ordering for food and drinks, and how they engage with each other. I miss that.
How do we build back better? easyJet were ahead of a lot of other airlines in announcing that you were going to offset all the carbon. You announced that in 2019, I think. How do we, as the climate gets increasingly challenged, I mean, the UK airline industry has lost around £7 billion since March last year. How do we ensure that we keep that commitment to green travel?
It's a very important point, because it is unfortunate that one of the things that I've seen when I look around the aviation, on a global scale, that there's been a number of companies who's withdraw from their commitments in terms of the roadmap on sustainability and achieving carbon neutrality and to decarbonize aviation overall. And we've stuck with, and we're staying with our commitment in terms of the flying that we do that is carbon neutral, because we're offsetting 100% of the fuel that we're using, and also the operations. And we did that in 2019, one, because we thought it's simply the right thing to do. It's part of our operations. I don't consider that as a kind of a separate investment. It's the way we operate. That's the way how we do things. And it's an important point, because one of the things that will be different, you said, when are we going to come back to what it used to be? Well, there's one thing that will be different going forward, and that is that it will be a much more focus on sustainability. And customers will care much more about the choices they make and the product and the services they buy from companies, in order to what impact does that have on the environment. We believe that that is part of how we're operating. The carbon offsetting scheme is really also a bridge before you get on to the real groundbreaking technologies. And it's so exciting to still see, you know, in 2020, which was this awful year for aviation, but there was still a lot of progress within the areas of hydrogen technology, as an example, on electric flying, that we also have a partnership with a company in the US who's looking now to build a 180-seater here by 2030. Airbus has now planned for a hydrogen aircraft of similar size in 2035. And it's really, you know, it's been an acceleration in technology breakthroughs in this area, and that will continue. Now, it's so important, and one of the difficulties around this is, of course, that, you know, while you know, the industry has incurred so much losses and taken on so much debt, that we would really need to have all funds available to continue to invest in that area. So that's why it's important also that governments do what they can to support and also incentivize, you know, companies in this sector to move towards these new technologies. You know, from a technical point of view, well, today there are electric aircraft flying, much smaller, of course, but nobody's questioning whether this is possible or not. It's all about the time and what will the business model look like when you do that, because there will need to be some changes in terms of the infrastructure. But it's very, very exciting. If you're looking what we are planning for and what our partner is looking to have is basically to be able to fly 2,000 kilometers, which would cover about, you know, 80% of the network in Europe. And to do that with that technology means that you're simply going to be able to operate on a, you know, zero emissions basis. This is one of the great things about this. This is actually zero emissions. I know there's a lot of talk about sustainable aviation fuels, and we're not against that at all. But, you know, still, it needs worth remembering that, you know, it has similar characteristics when in use to kerosene and to fossil fuel. Of course, when you grow the crops and the plants, then it works as a carbon sink, so it becomes like an offsetting in itself. But I think the hydrogen proposal and then also electric, if it's a sustainable fuel source, is more exciting, actually.
Where do you stand on airport expansion? Do you think we have enough runway space at the moment in the UK?
Well, currently, very much yes. Of course. But look, I think it remains to be seen. But I think it will take quite a lot of time before you're going to see any more investments in new runways. And not only in the UK, I think really across Europe.
Was there anything you'd have liked the government to have handled differently, going back, kind of thinking now it's nearly a year since the pandemic, reflecting if there was another pandemic, God forbid, is there anything you'd have liked them to do differently?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think, you know, to reiterate what we had called out for, you know, a separate support to the sector. You know, we were identified as being, you know, the sector that was probably the worst hit, the industry who was taking the biggest damage out of this. And this is, to your point, this is a little bit more than just coming up to a year ago, and we still haven't seen any specific, you know, support to airlines. So whilst others industries now has, well, you know, even along this pandemic has you know, had great times and making, you know, record profits. This is a sector who is struggling tremendously. It's basically become illegal to use the product and services ourselves. It is illegal to go on a holiday, as an example. So, you know, without having any specific support to ourselves, I think that is still something that we call out for. And of course, also, I think that there's been some measures that's been introduced that was, you know, badly designed. It wasn't effective. It didn't make sense. And of course, there's been a lot of back and forth in terms of introduction of some, and then what the plan is on how this is going to be unwinded. That is still something we expecting clarity for. And, you know, this has been going on now for coming up to a year, and we still don't have that roadmap on how these things will be eased off and unwinded. Having said that, this is tricky. This is difficult. This is not something that I envy decision makers, you know, in the government on having to deal with, but it doesn't change the fact that it needs to be dealt with. and the roadmap needs to come out now, and hopefully we will get it from the Prime Minister on the 22nd.
What's kept you going throughout this year?
What kept me going throughout this year? Look, it's a big challenge, and you set out that you want to make it through. You want to get through this. I feel responsibility for people in the organization, our customers, shareholders, and all the stakeholders in here. But I also know, and I've been in this industry for so long time now, that that there will be a huge boom when things comes back again. But I want to make sure that we come through this and we set ourselves up also to lead as we go through the recovery. And to some extent, and I know this sounds perhaps strange, this is extraordinarily interesting. It's very difficult and many challenges, and certainly experiences that you would like to have been without. But sometimes you don't get to choose the cards you've been dealt with, and then you can turn it around and say, well, let's make the best out of this. Let's learn, and it gives me and other people also tremendous experiences that other people wouldn't be close to. So you got to take a look at also some of the positives around this. But I love this company, I love the airline, and I know that this airline means so much for millions of people. easyJet is an integral part in how people have lived their lives, as we said earlier, to go and see their parents and visiting friends, in a convenient way, and it feels very, it's a privileged thing to be part of something that is so meaningful for so many.
Hopefully we'll look back on this in 2023 from a lovely beach in Mallorca and marvel at how extraordinary it was and how we got through.
Perhaps even this summer, who knows?